Roughly 13 years ago, Mazda offered a sporty, turbocharged two-row midsize SUV in America called the CX-7. Now, the CX-7 got a lot of respect from enthusiasts because it was essentially a lifted and slightly bigger version of the very popular Mazda Speed 3 hatchback. However, sadly, in terms of sales, it was a dud because it was very inefficient and it also didn't have that much space when you looked at other two-row rivals. Now, of course, fast forward 15 years, and Mazda is looking to try again with the introduction of this vehicle. This is the 2025 Mazda CX-70. It's built on an all-new rear-wheel drive architecture that also it shares with the CX-90, and under the hood you're going to find a choice between either a turbocharged inline 6 like I'm showing you here, or a plug-in hybrid powertrain to get the best fuel efficiency. So as you can see, this week Mazda has loaned us the top-of-the-line version of the CX-70 known as the Turbo S Premium Plus, and the big question I want to answer, for those of you who are looking to replace your old CX-7, has Mazda created a viable alternative or replacement with this new CX-70? Stay tuned to find out. So before we start talking about the exterior styling of this CX-70 Turbo S Premium Plus, I thought I'd lift the hood and show you guys what's powering this thing. Now, as you guys know, Mazda has a brand new longitudinal rear-wheel drive architecture that was first introduced on the CX-90. These two vehicles are essentially the same car, so under the hood here, you're gonna find the top engine choice, a 3.3-liter turbocharged inline 6. Now, underneath the hood, as you can see, there's a big plastic cover, although if you basically twist this and twist this over here, you can actually lift up the cover and take a look at the engine. This engine is a brand new clean sheet design. It's a turbocharged inline 6, and I have to say, for Mazda to come up with a new powertrain, it is just kind of a really big feat of engineering. This 3.3-liter gasoline direct injection Skyactiv G inline 6 with a turbocharger pumping it up to 19 pounds of max boost pressure is augmented by a mild hybrid system, a 48-volt mild hybrid system called M Hybrid Boost. The output figures for the Turbo S increased to 340 horsepower and 369 pound-feet of torque. That's about 60 more horsepower versus the non-S version, the Turbo, which makes around 280 horsepower. The mild hybrid assist adds around 16.6 horsepower on its own, but it can never deliver it at the same time as the engine on its own, which is why you can't technically combine the outputs. It all goes out through an 8-speed automatic transmission. It's technically an 8-speed auto with a wet clutch system, so it's not a traditional torque converter automatic. The battery pack is a very minuscule 0.33 kilowatt hours. Again, it's just there to essentially assist this vehicle in starting and stopping at low speeds, or when it shuts off, much more seamlessly, and improving the fuel efficiency ever so slightly. This vehicle, as it sits, it has a EPA rating of around 23 in the city, 28 on the highway. That's on premium gas. This has just under a 20-gallon fuel tank. You're looking at around 400-ish miles of range on a full tank. Mazda doesn't claim a 0 to 60 time, but I'd estimate it to be in the low 6-second range. We'll try it out when we get it out on the road. It has a top speed of around 130 miles an hour, and because this vehicle is built on a big longitudinal rear drive architecture, it can tow a maximum of 5,000 pounds. That's more versus some of its other two-row midsize rivals. And as this car sits, it weighs in at just over 4,800 pounds. It's about 50 pounds lighter versus the 3-row CX-90. But let's go ahead and close up this hood and talk about the exterior styling. Now, first of all, this color is basically a Mazda hero color. It's called Soul Red Crystal Metallic. It's an extra $595 extra, and compared to the CX-90, on which this vehicle is essentially the same car, the front end gets a slightly more sportier vibe to it. So of course, you have standard full LED headlights with an LED daytime running light, LED turn signal, LED low and high beams. You have a darkened version of the Mazda signature 5-point grille with this kind of gloss black chain link fence insert. You can see it's got the big Mazda logo there with the integrated camera and radar sensors. The turn signals also do kind of an interesting fade in and fade out for the actual blinker and indicator. You can see down here at the lower fascia. I much prefer this over the 90, which has kind of like a smaller air intake, although that's technically fake. There are some functional vents here. Love the body colored front splitter, which again, the CX-90 has more chrome as opposed to the black and body colored finish that you get with the 70. And overall, it's still a handsome looking SUV, but again, some of you may just confuse this for a CX-90 with the Sport package, which you can technically get this kind of package on the 90 for 2025, which kind of makes this car look, again, even more like a CX-90. Now, moving around the side profile, you guys have probably heard me mention this before, and from other reviewers, the two cars are the same size. So compared to other mid-size two-row rivals, this car is big, around 6 to 10 inches larger than the overall length at just under 201 inches long with a 122-inch long wheelbase. Again, I really think it's a missed opportunity for Mazda to not make this car smaller, because not everybody wants such a big two-row SUV. You can see the CX-70 does get its own unique finish for the wheels with its own unique design. These are a 21-inch multiple spoke design with a two-tone black and machine look to it. You have a 275 by 45 R21 Falcon all-season tire, all independent suspension, no adaptive dampers. Mazda says you have around 8 inches of ground clearance with a 13.7-inch rotor at the front and at the rear. You can see this little badge here tells everybody you have the inline 6. The Turbo S Premium is the only one that comes with the full paint finish. I love that look here with the body colored around the entire vehicle. It just makes for a clean and more premium looking design. You can see the mirrors are black painted, integrated turn signals. These are power folding with cameras surrounding it. You can see there's also a dark chrome around, or a dark flat black, I'm sorry, around the window trim, a gloss black for the roof rails, and you also have a panoramic sunroof. That's standard when you guys go for this top trim, which is nice. And then looking at the vehicle from this angle, you can see it kind of just looks like a supersized version of the CX-5, which isn't a bad thing. I think this car's design continues to look really good. It's aging really well. And it's also, the 90's been kind of a big sales success for Mazda. Now moving around the rear, you can see the rear taillights also have kind of like that skinny full LED design with the turn signals that also fade in and out, LED reverse lights, LED brake lights. Down here at the lower fascia, it also has a slightly sportier look with a fake air intake look to it. No visible exhaust tips. I would have liked to see a dual exhaust on the Turbo S. Again, there's an eSkyActiv G badge to show that this is a mild hybrid with their SkyActiv G engine, which stands for gasoline engine. It has a high compression ratio. I would have liked to see Mazda put like a bigger spoiler back here for the 70. The rear wiper, as you can see, is just sitting there on the glass as opposed to being hidden behind like the rear wiper, or the rear spoiler, like some competitors. And then looking at the cargo area, you can see this is why Mazda kept the vehicle so big on the outside, and that's because they wanted to give it class-leading cargo space. Although technically it isn't class-leading, but it is among the best. You can see with the second row seats up, you get just over 40 cubic feet of cargo space, which is again pretty similar to what you get in a CX-90 with the third row seat folded. Some of the new features are these little buttons here where you can push that. That does expand the cargo capacity, and when you fold down the second row seats, Mazda says you get a little over 75 cubic feet of space. I do like how you can basically fold the seat down from back here with the push of a button. You also have power outlet back here, an actual power outlet, a 12-volt outlet. You can see these are remnants of the third row from the 90 where you have cup holders back here, which aren't really necessary. And then if you look underneath here, there's also some underfloor storage. And then Mazda gives you another underfloor storage area where the third row would go. So that's kind of a nice little bonus feature. But again, why couldn't they just call this car a CX-90 with the third row seat removed, a two-row CX-90? But overall, again, cargo area is among the best in the segment, but you should keep in mind that some other competitors offer the same, if not a little bit less cargo space in a vehicle that is much smaller on the outside. So moving on to the interior of this fully loaded Mazda CX-70, before we get inside, let me show you guys the key fob for this vehicle. You can see this is the Mazda Corporate Intelligent Access Key. It is a large key, which I don't love the size of it. It's got buttons on the side here for lock, unlock, remote for the trunk release, and then a panic function. I actually prefer the smaller size of Mazda's old key, but as you approach the vehicle, you can see there is a traditional door handle. The vehicle has an auto walk-away lock feature, which if you have that turned on, shut the door with the key on you, walk away, the doors will lock, the mirrors will fold in, touch the back of the door handle here, that will unlock the door for you. Now, this particular color combination is absolutely exquisite. It's the Soul Red Crystal exterior color for an extra $600, and then the Premium Plus Turbo S only comes with the tan quilted premium Napa leather interior. You can see the seats look like they belong in a luxury car, aside from a lack of any kind of branding on the actual seat back. I love the quilted leather here with the Alcantara the black stripe here, the slightly contrast stitching. These seats adjust in 12 different ways. They are heated and ventilated. Sadly, Mazda doesn't offer massaging seats, but the seats do have a 2-person memory on the driver's side. I also love how the two-tone continues onto the dash and onto the steering wheel, and it also is carried over onto the door panels. This upper door panel here has a soft touch injection molded plastic. This tries to almost look like a black ash wood, but it's definitely a fake material. There's kind of a gloss gray plastic here, nice Alcantara padded leather over here, and this is definitely really plush. I love that. When you guys are resting your elbows there. Window controls, they are chrome accented and they feel pretty high quality. You have one touch for all 4. Storage down here, although it is hard touch plastic. And then for those of you who are an audiophile, there's the signature Bose sound system, which sounds okay. It's not, you know, as good as the high-end systems you're gonna find from a luxury brand, but it does the job well. And if you guys like music, you're definitely gonna like the Bose audio system. Now, getting inside with 8 inches of ground clearance, this car has a nice, easy step-in height. As I shut the door, the door has a pretty solid sounding thunk. Remember, this is built on a new rear wheel drive architecture. And when you want to start the car up, the start stop button is right here. And what's interesting to me is this car is supposed to be a mild hybrid, but it actually has a traditional starter sound. So I don't know if Mazda did that on purpose or if it maybe have to do with the limitations of their mild hybrid system. But most vehicles that are mild hybrids kind of just whir to life. There's not a traditional distinctive starter noise, which could be, you know, a deal breaker, or it could be a good thing for some of you. You can see the steering wheel. I love the 2-tone design with the tan and the black, the contrast stitching. With the luxury car-like cross-stitching. I love the aluminum and metal trim here and here. You have a power tilt telescoping wheel included with the Turbo S trim. You can't get that on the plug-in hybrid. You have paddles on the wheel to control the 8-speed auto. Actual hard buttons here to control your audio system, to control the Mazda adaptive cruise control, which is standard equipment. The horn, it sounds pretty much what you'd expect it to be given the, you know, dimensions and size of this vehicle. You do have a heads-up display, which is slightly customizable here. And you can also see there's a nice padded soft touch area in the upper dashboard here. You have beautiful Alcantara and stitching here for this lower part of the dash, which also carries over here to the air vents. The interior looks exactly the same as the CX-70, CX-90. All CX-70s, however, come standard with the 12.3-inch fully digital display. So you have a 12.3-inch display here for the instrument panel, which is slightly customizable. You can see if I put on the adaptive cruise, it turns on a slightly different look to the gauge display. If I start cycling the drive modes, you can see going into an off-road mode and going into a sport mode, it changes the way the color of the gauges looks. You can see it goes red in sport, and in off-road mode it kind of gives you a geometric pattern there, almost like a gear pattern with some brown themes in it as well. Most of you will drive in normal mode. There's 3 different drive modes. You have a 12.3-inch fully digital display over here, which this is not a touchscreen when you're in the Mazda native system. And when you're in the native system, you have to use this annoying rotary wheel to access it. It becomes a touchscreen when I go into the CarPlay. You can see it's a wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. You can see once it's a touchscreen, it's really easy to use. It's a good size, although I kind of wish that Mazda would get rid of the non-used areas here to expand this to be like a 14-inch display. The touchscreen is also usable when the vehicle is in motion, but only if you have it in the CarPlay function. Go back to the native system. Again, you kind of go back to using the annoying rotary command controller to access that. But there is factory embedded GPS in this car, as you can see. Most of you are probably not going to use it. You're just going to use your phone. You can see it's really slow to populate. I believe it still uses a TomTom navigation services, and it just is not great. I would definitely just skip this and just use the CarPlay and Android Auto, which most of you are going to use anyway. When I put the vehicle into reverse, you can see this shifter is kind of annoying. You have to pull on this trigger here and kick it this way to go to reverse. You can see there's your full top-down 360 camera. That's included when you guys go for this Premium Plus trim. You can also see it has trajectory, it has distance markers, it has your cross-traffic alert and braking, of course. You can also kind of go in here and change the views over there if you'd prefer a slightly wide-angle view like that, or a traditional view. Camera resolution and quality is pretty much how you'd expect it to be. Down here you can see there are actual hard buttons for your heated and cooled seats. That's included on this trim. You have a tri-zone automatic temperature control. I like the buttons and knobs. They have a high quality textile feel to them. And you can see there's a wireless phone charging pad here, a 12-volt power outlet. This again tries to look like wood, but it's just a plastic piece here. You have your drive mode selector here, downhill assist control, and then you can see that pulls up your 360 camera as well when you push that button. You have a volume knob here, electronic parking brake, your control knob over here, and then if you open this up, you can see you have cup holders, which are a pretty decent size. There's a nice padded center console here. If I open that up, you can see it's a little bit shallow, but you have 2 USB-C charging ports. And again, it provides some decent covered storage, which is nice. The seats, as I mentioned earlier, they look like they could belong in a luxury car. They are comfortable and supportive. I love how plush they are. I love the padding and the cushioning. It feels nice and, you know, supportive for longer trips. Down here, you can see this is a hard touch plastic, but I like how it's the same color as the rest of the tan. You can see, open that up, the glove box is damped and lined with felt. It goes into the dash. It's actually a pretty big size, which is good for, you know, even more storage, because storage is very important typically in this segment. You can see the mirror here is auto dimming. You can get a digital camera rearview mirror for an extra 800 bucks. There's like a woven material here for the headliner, LED map lighting, and then you can see big panoramic roof. This also opens up to vent air, as you can see, only over the 2 front seats, but that's the largest that it opens. It's not that big for an opening, but it's nice that Mazda at least gives you the option to actually open it up to vent air. But overall, the interior is identical to a CX-90, which isn't a bad thing. The tech in the car, I'd say, is average to below average when you're looking at the native system, and the material quality is good. The seats are comfortable, visibility is good, so I think most of you are going to be pretty pleasantly surprised, especially if you haven't been in some of the newer Mazda products. But let's go ahead and hop into the back seat area, because the back seat of the CX-70 is also another strong point. When I open the door here, you can see the door opens up huge, so you can easily get a car seat back here where you need to latch it in. You can see the seats themselves. These are basically lifted out of the CX-90, at least the bench seat is. You can't get captain's chairs in this vehicle, and that's because, again, the third row has been removed. What's also interesting is you can fold down this third row, which gives you access to the cargo area, but again, it kind of also still gives you the ability to slide this seat forward and back and recline that. So that kind of is a nice little touch. You can see over on the door panel, it's the same soft touch injection molded plastic. You do have these manual retractable peasant blockers, more of that fake wood trim, the gloss gray accents, the Alcantara, and the nice softly padded armrest here. There's a big storage area down here. And then once you get into the back seat area, Mazda says that you have up to 39.4 inches of legroom, which is a pretty good amount. It's a generous amount, but you're gonna find a couple inches more in something like the Volkswagen Atlas Cross Sport. On the Honda Passport, for example, you can see this seat you can slide forward and back, which is a leftover part from the CX-90. It's not necessary when you don't have a third row, but once you're back here, you can see this is where I'd have the car to drive. I can get comfortable, I can cross my legs. There are 3 level heated seats back here, but no cooled seats. That would have been nice to include at this price point. You have, again, your own set of rear seat climate controls, 2 USBs, 2 air vents back here, along with 2 storage cubbies in each of the seat backs. You can see there's an armrest here that folds down and gives you 2 cup holders. And then in terms of the headroom space, there's a pretty good amount of headroom. This does take up a little bit of your headroom space, but overall, the CX-70 definitely has a bigger back seat than some rivals, but it's definitely not the biggest back seat, which is kind of annoying considering the fact that this car is definitely the biggest on the outside in all of the 2-row competitors. So here we are back behind the wheel of the top-of-the-line version of the Mazda CX-70, the Turbo S Premium Plus. The specs on this car practically scream budget BMW, but it's really the size of a BMW X7. The Turbo S means we have the 3.3-liter turbocharged inline 6 under the hood, electrified, of course, with a mild hybrid system. This powertrain, I found it to be excellent and solid in the CX-90, which again, the 2 cars are the exact same size. This is basically a 90 with the third row seat removed. They are practically the same weight, although I think this car is around 50 pounds lighter versus the 90. That shouldn't really make too much of a difference. Now, the last time I 0 to 60 tested the 90 with this powertrain, it did it in 6.2 seconds on this exact stretch of road. So let's go ahead and see what we can get in the slightly lighter CX-70. I imagine it's going to be probably similar. Now, to get the best time, you basically need to have it in sport mode, which we're in. You brake torque it, which it doesn't really like being brake torqued. So I'm actually just going to floor it and see what we can get. Still has that whiny sound. 0 to 60 happens in 6.27 seconds, so that's practically identical to the last 90 that I tested. It's also a smidge slower, 0.3 seconds slower versus the CX-70 plug-in hybrid, which again has the same plug-in hybrid powertrain from the 90, although that powertrain has less horsepower, it has the same torque. I am surprised actually that the Turbo S, with its increase in power, remember this has 340 horsepower versus 323, and the plug-in hybrid is slightly slower. The plug-in hybrid is a little bit heavier, like around 200 pounds heavier, but this powertrain does have a much better sound to it. It's got a really nice snarl to it, although you do hear a fair amount of whininess from the engine, which I don't particularly love the whininess. This 8-speed dual clutch, or 8-speed automatic, with a wet clutch system. Shifts pretty quick. It redlines, or it shifts at around 60 or 6100 RPM. There we just got 6.78 seconds. I tried brake torquing it there. This doesn't really allow you to brake torque it or launch it. I wish Mazda would actually throw in launch control into this car. I think that would help the acceleration a little bit because it feels a little bit soft off the line, but once you get it going, there's plenty of mid-range grunt. This engine feels well matched to the 8 speeds that you get from this transmission. It also feels well matched to the size of this vehicle. And again, the sound is certainly interesting. I just wish it didn't have quite the whininess that you typically don't get with like a BMW straight six. When you put your foot down, you can feel so much mid-range torque, and the transmission is just eager to shift this vehicle, shift it very quickly, get it through the gears, of course, keep it in the meat of the power band. It's a really nice combination. But really, you know, if you had to choose between the inline six and the plug-in hybrid, it really just depends on what kind of daily driving you do. If you plan to do mostly around town driving and stop and go traffic, the plug-in hybrid makes sense. If you plan to do more highway driving and less stop and go traffic, the inline six makes sense, and we'll talk about that later on. Now, in terms of the chassis, Mazda has always built, you know, vehicles for driving. Driving matters is their slogan. The CX-70 certainly feels that way. We have an all-independent suspension. We have a rear drive chassis. No adaptive dampers, though, or air suspension. Remember, this is a Mazda. It's not a fully premium vehicle like a luxury car, for example, so you have to give up some of those touches. But this vehicle handles well. The steering is sharp, quick, and direct. The suspension stays mostly flat, although you do feel it's tuned more for, you know, daily driving as opposed to all-out handling. Put my foot down here. You can sort of feel the rear drive chassis. Man, this engine really loves to rev, but it also is super whiny, and I feel a little bit of vibration toward the higher rev ranges. Don't love that feel. You won't get that in like a BMW or a Mercedes, but the fact that I am comparing a Mazda to a BMW and a Mercedes is kind of impressive. So kind of, you know, give Mazda props there, because the company is, again, kind of occupying a white space between luxury and mainstream. I'm gonna floor it here again just one more time, see what we can get. Again, feels a little soft. All right, we got 6.6 there, so we'll take the quickest time as 6.27. Again, not the fastest vehicle in this segment, but I guess if you're comparing it to just mainstream offerings, this is gonna feel, you know, pretty quick. The Toyota Crown Signia should be slower, although that's far more fuel efficient with its hybrid powertrain. The Honda Passport with its naturally aspirated V6 should be pretty similar in terms of acceleration. The Volkswagen Atlas should be a little bit slower, the Atlas Cross Sport, that is. The Subaru Outback is a little bit quicker with its turbo engine, although some would argue the Subaru doesn't even compare. It's a so much smaller vehicle. It's a lifted station wagon, but price-wise, you could compare the two, although the Mazda is a little bit more on the pricier side, especially at the top end. Let's switch the drive mode here into its normal setting. This is probably how most of you are going to drive this vehicle. The gauge display changes color to show you you're in a different drive mode here. The steering gets a little bit lighter. The transmission gets a little bit soft, or a little bit more prone to shift into its higher gears. There's also an auto start stop feature in this vehicle, and with the M Hybrid Boost, the mild hybrid system, it does make for a slightly more smoother start stop engagement. Although I did notice whenever the engine does shut off, it does shut off the air conditioning system as well. The only mild hybrid that I've tested which actually leaves the AC on when the engine shuts off is a Mercedes, and that's because Mercedes designed a separate air conditioning system to still stay on when the engine does turn off. So that's something to keep in mind. Overall visibility out of this car is good, out of the front, the side. This pillar is a little bit thick. The view out of the rear is also good. My test car is missing the digital camera review mirror, which is an extra $800. I highly recommend that if you plan to keep, you know, lots of stuff, or you put a lot of tall friends in the back that might block your rear view. The head restraints in the back does block the view partially. Ride quality is also good, even though we're on these big 21s. This car glides down the road pretty nicely. I actually think the ride feels smoother than the last plug-in hybrid that I tested, so not entirely sure why that is. They have the same size wheel and tire package, but this car is also quiet inside. When you're not pushing the engine really hard, it's really smooth, it's really quiet, there's very little road, wind, and engine noise coming in, and it reminds you that you are driving something that is more of a premium car. I even love these seats, the suede and leather, two-tone Napa leather seats, plus the tan color. It's absolutely gorgeous, but they are comfortable on longer drives that I had this thing you know, I took this thing on, and it also has heated and ventilated seats. The cooled seat function works really nicely, actually. In the hot summer heat, they, you know, cooled up really nicely. Some cooled seats feel like they're not even on at all. So I applaud Mazda for whatever supplier they're using for their cooled seats. It works well. And then in terms of the fuel efficiency, in my weeks for the testing, I averaged around 25 mpg in mixed driving. On the highway, this thing got closer to 30, almost 30 mpg in pure highway driving, which is excellent. This thing gets better gas mileage in the highway than the plug-in hybrid did, and that has a 4-cylinder. You can credit that for less weight in this powertrain combination, and just the inline 6 in general is super fuel efficient. Even in around town driving, 25 mpg is excellent. That's pretty much the same as the plug-in hybrid. So unless you need the electric only range with the plug-in hybrid, the inline 6 is going to get pretty similar gas mileage. Also keep in mind it'll do around 400 miles of range on a full tank. Technically, by the numbers with a 20-gallon fuel tank, you should be able to do 450, but I only did around 400 in my actual testing, which is still pretty darn good. The plug-in hybrid should get a similar amount of range as well, because of the, you know, electric only portion. But overall, you know, the CX-70 to me still pretty much drives like a big, like a CX-90. There's no difference to the size of the vehicle, to the weight. There's slight differences in the suspension and tuning, the suspension programming or tuning and the steering, whatnot. But personally, I still think this car is kind of a missed opportunity for Mazda to introduce a vehicle that is around 6 to 10 inches shorter, to give you, you know, less cumbersome dimensions to deal with if you are parking in a tight parking situation, or just have a little bit less weight. But again, if you guys want, you know, that extra cargo space and the extra rear seat room, this is definitely among the biggest and the most spacious that you're going to find in the two-row non-luxury SUV segment. So if you guys are a current owner of a Mazda CX-7 and you're hoping that the new CX-70 would be a viable replacement for that, I have to say, if you are used to the smaller dimensions and sportier driving dynamics of that car, you might be slightly disappointed with the new CX-70, because remember, this car is huge on the outside. It's the same size as a 3-row CX-90, which means it's around 6 to 10 inches longer than most of its 2-row rivals, which also means it's heavier, but it does give you more of what the typical buyer in this segment is looking for, which is more rear seat legroom and more cargo space. Although Mazda still has some packaging inefficiencies to deal with because of how big this car is on the outside, it really just has kind of average to, you know, near top of the class space, when it should have the best in class space because it's so large. The turbocharged inline 6 is still a gem of an engine, although it does have some rather unpleasant whiny sounds. But as you guys saw, 0 to 60 happens in 6.2 seconds, which is a little bit slower than the plug-in hybrid, but you do get, again, better gas mileage on the highway, which could be, you know, something that you're looking for if you plan to do mostly highway driving. The seats are comfortable. The interior tech in this car, while Mazda did add wireless CarPlay and Android Auto, and it's finally a touchscreen in CarPlay when the vehicle is moving, I still don't love the Mazda native system. I'm still waiting for the company to do an all-new software for that, where they've made it a full touchscreen with that, with moving the screen forward. So I'm hoping that's what they're working on, because I think that's what most people typically want, is a touchscreen which you can interact with, which is really closer, you know, to your actual, you know, usage area where you're going to be touching the screen. The backseat area is certainly large, but so are other vehicles in this segment. The cargo area is on the larger side, but again, it's not any bigger versus something like a Honda Pilot, a Volkswagen Atlas Cross Sport, or even a Subaru Outback in terms of the actual dimensions. In terms of real world space, I'd say it's probably a little bit bigger versus something like an Outback. But really, where you might find some disappointment in this car is the fact that it's not actually smaller. If you guys live in an area where, you know, it's more city and there's a little bit less space, you don't want to necessarily drive around in an SUV that's this big. And again, you may want something that's a little bit lighter, a little bit better handling. That's where the old CX-7 comes into play. So I think it's a little bit of a missed opportunity for Mazda to not make this car smaller, but I understand why they didn't want to, because they also wanted to give it best in class or near best in class interior space. The other thing that kind of is a little bit shocking to see with the pricing of the CX-70 is it's actually more expensive versus the CX-90, the 3-row variant of this vehicle. However, there's an asterisk there because this car only starts as a preferred trim. There's no base select trim. So on paper, it looks like it's around $2,500 more expensive versus a CX-90, but in reality, this car's base price is around $40,400 for the turbo preferred trim with all-wheel drive as standard, of course. That's around $500 cheaper versus a comparable CX-90. Now, of course, if you want to go to the Turbo S Premium or Turbo S trim level, which starts at the Premium, you're going to have to at least spend another $12,000 on top of the $40,000 500 base price. This model here with the Premium Plus package has a base price starting at around $57,000 or $56,000. Add destination charge and the upcharge for this Soul Red color, and you're looking at an as-tested price of just under 58 grand, around 57.9, which again sounds pretty darn expensive, but you should keep in mind that competitors like the Toyota Crown Signia, the Volkswagen Atlas Cross Sport, for example, the Honda Passport, they all have a starting price in a similar range, and they can all go above $50,000 into the mid-50s, although at the top end, the Mazda is more expensive, but some of you may argue that you could also start comparing it with like a BMW X5, which an X5 starts in the mid-$60,000 range with its inline six, although some would also say that the Mazda can't quite deliver in terms of acceleration and driving dynamics, which I would agree with that because I've spent some time with the base six-cylinder X5. But again, if that's not necessarily important to you and you've never really owned a BMW and lived with the BMW, this comes pretty darn close, along with its stylish, exterior design and premium interior appointments. So I think for those of you who are looking for all that and you don't necessarily need the badge snobbery with a luxury brand, you should definitely put the latest Mazda CX-70 at the top of your list. But with all that said, hope you guys have enjoyed my full overview on the 2025 Mazda CX-70 in the Turbo S Premium Plus trim level. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at Redline_reviews, like us on Facebook, and as always, guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.